Hello friends, this is Worm, back today with another episode of What If Wednesday, the series where we talk about fun and wacky what ifs of Destiny 2. And today we are going to be talking about a user submitted request or a user submitted idea, which is not really new to Destiny. And of course they know that, but it is the idea of bringing self-res or self-resurrection back into Destiny 2. Now, we need to take a little trip down memory lane here, or take a trip through time for those of y'all who didn't play Destiny 1. But back in Destiny 1, and specifically if you were a warlock playing on solar in Destiny 1, you had the ability to put on, I don't remember the exact name of it because I don't do much research for these videos, but you could put on self-resurrection, right? And basically the way it worked is if you died and your super was fully charged, you could activate your super from beyond the grave. Right, you could activate your super after you died. So, you know, you die, your ghost would be like floating there, like your little orb would be there. You could hit your bumpers, right, on your controller or whatever the button binds that you had it set to, where, and you would pop back to life, and it would start your super. Right, and the super was Radiance. We're not gonna go into detail on what all that was and what all that entailed, but that was something that you could do back in Destiny 1. Warlocks could do back in Destiny 1, and it was a pretty neat ability. I'm not gonna lie, like I used it when I played Warlock. Warlock was my least favorite class back in D1, but I did have one, and I did use self-res on occasion, and it could come in pretty clutch, right? Trials of Osiris, you know, could come in really clutch. You know, a raid, it could come in really clutch. You know, a nightfall, it could come in really clutch, because back in D1, the nightfalls were basically the equivalent of Grandmasters. You didn't have difficulty settings, like it was just Grandmaster Nightfall, basically. Anyways, with that being said though, it's not in Destiny 2. And I want to first of all talk about why, because I think the why is important. Now, of course, you know, what I'm going to talk about here, this is all like speculation and distant memory that I have from the past. Like, again, I have not done any in-depth research on anything Bungie has said, but I'm pretty sure that at some point in the past, a developer at Bungie said that the reason why they didn't bring self-res back to Destiny 2 was because it broke the game, right? And I mean, if you think about it, you know, the way it was in Destiny 1, you know, you would die. As long as you had your super, you could activate it and it would start your super, right? You know, your Radiant super. And regardless of what you think about Radiant super, like it would activate your super and you could run around while you were in super, blah, blah, blah. Like imagine a Dawn Blade now. Imagine you kill somebody in Trials of Osiris, for an example, and they come back to life and now Dawn Blade is active and they can fly around the map and just absolutely obliterate your team, right? Like that was one of the things. There was more than just PvP. We're gonna start with PvP, but you know, it gave an unfair advantage to teams of warlocks, right? Like, because you would run triple warlocks, right? Like I did it in Trials, you know, run triple warlocks, because running triple warlocks, you could ensure that, hey, we have at least, you know, 3 extra chances in a game. And most of the time, with the way that Radiance worked in D1, you could get it back very quickly. Like I'm pretty sure there were games, like Trials games, where I could self-res at least twice during those games, right? And that's just, it's not a fair advantage, right? Because like once you kill somebody, they should stay dead. Because what would end up happening, you know, somebody would kill, you know, a warlock in Trials, and you would have to leave somebody on that body with a special weapon, because as soon as they came back to life, you needed to be able to kill them, right? So enemy teams would, you know, their teammate would die and they would run off somewhere else, so they would split your team up. Well, then all of a sudden the warlock self-reses, super's going, blah, blah, blah. And it was just a really frustrating ordeal inside of PvP. And again, it was an insanely strong advantage. You know, and warlocks in Destiny 1's PvP, they had a lot of other stuff like the ram that just gave you extra armor, among other things that could really, really make you a powerful, like, you know, enemy to fight, right? And so that's the PvP side of things. But on the PvE side of things, Bungie, they didn't like that self-res was like an absolute necessity in in-game content. Now, granted, in in-game content, raids were a little bit more difficult in Destiny 1. You know, Nightfalls were more difficult in Destiny 1. Well, more or less, I'll say that, more or less difficult in Destiny 1. Like everything was a little bit harder in D1. Like D2 has a lot of build crafting and stuff, and it can make in-game content trivial, right? Not all of it. You know, last week's Grandmaster is an example. Like there's nothing that made that easy. Like that was misery, no matter how you looked at it, right? But Destiny 1 content was a lot harder. So having that self-res ability in your back pocket was kind of a big deal, right? And players, warlocks, would use that, and that's all that warlocks would use. Like, you never saw Nova bombs in PvE, you never saw Storm Trance in PvE, which granted Storm Trance came a little bit after D1's initial launch, but you never saw any of these other subclasses being used. And even on Solar, you never saw any of the either of the other two super nodes being used, because self-res was that good. Like, the ability to bring yourself back from the dead was that good. And that's the other reason why Bungie took out self-res from the game, right? But we are here to talk about what if they brought it back, and how they could bring it back without totally breaking the game. So, of course, with the reasons why they didn't bring it back to D2, sorry, God, I'm gonna get confused by saying that. With the reasons that they didn't bring it back into D2 kind of out there, we can now build on a foundation of like, okay, well, how could it work in D1? And I think probably one of the biggest issues with self-res back in Destiny 1, and one of the things that Bungie didn't like, was it excluded other classes, right? It excluded Hunter and it excluded Titan. Now, here's the thing. There are a lot of exclusions, so to speak, right? Titans are excluded from the ability to blink, right? Warlocks and Titans are excluded from the ability to easily turn invisible, right? Like, there are exclusions, and there are benefits to using certain classes, right? It's like that's not a secret. But if one class and one subclass could come back to life from the dead, because again, like, your life in Destiny is the most precious thing you have. Think about it. Like, if you are running around in a Nightfall and you die, especially if you die in a bad spot, that could be the end of that Grandmaster run. Same thing with a raid. If you die in a raid and your team doesn't have any res tokens left, that is a wipe for your team, unless you are playing on a very specific subclass and a very specific class, and so I think that's, having that having that ability stripped of, stripped from other classes. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Having that ability stripped from other classes, Titan and Hunter, is kind of a big no-no. And again, small things like Blink is a jump. Blink is not very popular either. Invis as good as it is, like, Void Titans have Overshield, Void Warlocks have Devour that they can activate. And yeah, you can activate all three across, with different fragments and aspects and stuff like that. But the ability to, again, to bring yourself back from the dead, that is literally game changing. Like, that is literally game changing, potentially game breaking. Like, imagine a Titan in last week's Nightfall runs in, does some crazy dumb stuff, gets a bunch of kills, causes some ignitions, whatever, blah blah, and then they die, and they can just bring themselves back from the dead with damage resistance and stuff and run to cover. Like that's potentially game breaking. So that's why, that's I think another reason why Bungie didn't bring it back for Destiny 2, is because they didn't want the other class to feel excluded from something so powerful. So if we were to bring it into Destiny 2, I think that the best way to bring self-res back into Destiny 2 would be on a whole new subclass, right? Not added to the Solar kit like it was in D1, not added to the, Void, Strand, Stasis, whatever. And I know, Stasis is the lifeblood or whatever it is, whatever Osiris calls it in game. I don't really remember, but yeah, like, none of those. Like, we would need a completely new subclass brought into the game to bring back self-resurrection, right? Now, on top of that, right, it can't just be free. It can't just be free. You can't, oh, I died, well, let me just bring myself back to life, right? Like, it would have to require something big. And of course, in Destiny 1, it was your super. If you didn't have your super, you couldn't activate it. And I think that a cool way that Bungie could bring it back in Destiny 2 is, of course, have it tied to the super still, right? But, instead of activating it and, activating whatever super it is that you have equipped, roaming, one-off, whatever super, like, it's almost a trade-off, right? You have your super, it's fully charged, your super is very good. Like, think about, Strand Titan. Let's pretend like Strand Titan. Like, Strand Titan is a great super. It can suspend, it can deal massive damage, it lasts a long time. But in Destiny 2, they could bring it back. They could bring self-res back so that on this new subclass, red subclass, I know there was a leak about red subclass, blah, 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 whatever, but on a red subclass, when you died, you would have the option to bring yourself back to life at the cost of your super, right? No longer just activate it and get a free super going, whatever. Like now you have the potential to come back to life, but your entire super is now gone. It's not present. It's been used already. And that's the whole super. Now, of course, if you're alive and well and you activate your super, you can go off and do whatever the super is that it does, right? You know, if it's a roaming super, you can go run into a room, kill a bunch of stuff. If it's a one-off super, you can blast it into the boss, whatever you want to do. You can still use your super while you're alive. But if you die, it gives you that second chance at the cost of your super. And I would even go as far to say all your other abilities too. You know, you have to have your super fully charged, but if you have your grenade, melee, and class ability, all of those are drained, right? It doesn't require all four to activate from beyond the grave, but it does drain all the energy from them. That way, you know, if you die and you bring yourself back, like you don't have, you know, an emergency, oh, like, you know, whatever in my back pocket, you know, oh, I don't have, you know, Berserker super in my back pocket, I can just, you know, smash everything and suspend stuff, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, like you are left vulnerable. You don't have a grenade, you don't have a melee, you don't have a class ability, you don't have anything that you can use to get you out of cover. Like when you revive yourself and you come back from the grave or whatever you want to call it, you have to immediately find a place, a safe place to go, right? Because this is again, this is something that, you know, it made in-game content, I don't want to say easier, but it made people a little bit careless in-game content, right? Because you could run in there as a warlock, you could, you know, kill a bunch of stuff, die, spawn back in with your super, run back to safety, throw a bunch of grenades, blah, 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 whatever, right? And not really have to worry about it. Now though, with this idea tied to a new subclass that sucks away your super, your grenades, your melees, everything, when you come back to life, if you are in the middle of a fight, if you're being like slammed by a boss still, you're gonna be in a world of trouble, right? And I think that this, of course, would be a fair balance because, again, the ability to bring yourself back to life from the grave, like from beyond the grave, you just back into the game without costing revive tokens, or maybe with costing revive tokens, but not putting your teammates at risk, you know, not putting, you know, your teammates at a disadvantage, so to speak, because you're dead and all this stuff. Like this has to come with a strong trade-off. And I think that draining all of your abilities and costing your super should be one of those things. And again, if you don't have your super, you can't do it, right? Like, yeah, like, like I get the ability to come back from the dead, but I have nothing. Like you're gonna have it all sucked away from you instantly, because that's the balancing factor. And because also like it wouldn't promote carelessness, because again, one of the things with self-res back in D1, players could run around, die in the middle of the open, spawn back in radiance, blah blah blah, whatever, and they can run back to safety, right? That I think should also be changed. Like I think you should still have to be careful and cautious, right? So another thing that could potentially happen when you resurrect yourself, you know, and you come back, as soon as you're able to move, you lose the overshield that you had, and you're at maybe like red bar health, right? Or maybe your resilience is compromised, like you have tier 0 resilience, something like that. Just something so that if you're out in the middle of the open, you're being an idiot, just running out there and you die, you don't have the luxury of just, oh, I'm just gonna self-res and run to cover. No, like you're gonna die again because you were being dumb. Be different if, hey, I'm playing it safe back here, I got picked off by a sniper, which is okay, you know, that sucks and all, but hey, you know what? Pick myself back up. Now I can dip behind cover. I have an extra, you know, I get that 3 seconds to run behind cover, you know, and not get absolutely massacred by all these ads out here, right? Because again, I cannot stress how important it is. The ability to bring yourself back from the dead is incredibly strong, right? But that's kind of the first thought. Another thought that I had on what Bungie could potentially do to bring, you know, allow players to bring themselves back from the dead is, instead of actually dying, when you hit that threshold, when you hit that, you know, that threshold to die, so to speak, you are put in a dying state, right? And one of the things I remember is back in the Red War, the very start of Destiny 2, you know, spoiler alert. Okay, I gave you a warning. When you were thrown off the tower by Gaul and you fell and you hit the ground and you spawned back in, you were almost dead. You were literally crawling around on all fours very slowly. Bungie could do something like that. Instead of just dying, you know, your ghost doesn't pop up, it doesn't say wipe, but you are knocked down in third person to your hands and knees, and you have, like, you know, you have 8 seconds to crawl out of the way, and after 8 seconds, you're brought back up. right? After 8 seconds, as long as you don't take X amount of damage, you're brought back to life, you know, and you're at low health, whatever, but you're brought back to life, right? Because again, you know, this would be one of those things like, oh, like I got downed right in front of the boss because the boss stomped on me. Well, now I'm gonna crawl out of the way, but since you're not dead, the boss can just stomp you again and actually kill you, right? Again, it's got to deter that careless gameplay. It's got to deter that careless gameplay, because that's what self-res did back in Destiny 1. So, you know, but back to the scenario, you know, oh, you get boss stomped, then you get boss stomped a second time, and you're out, right? But if you get picked off by a sniper, you're dropped into that dying state. You can crawl, right? You can shimmy on or crawl back behind cover, and then after 8 seconds, I just use 8 as an example, but after 8 seconds, you're brought back to life. You have low shields, you have no super, no grenade, no melee, no class ability, none of that stuff, but you are still alive. That would be a really cool, and I think that would, honestly, I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think that'd be the better way that Bungie could do it, because then also, like, we got to talk about PvP as well, right? Like, we'll finish talking about PvE, but in PvE, you know, you go down, like, enemies, they're still able to target you. Like, let's say your enemy targeting is reduced by 90%, right? So 90% of the ads and 90% of the bullets or whatever will not be targeted towards you, but there is still a couple ads that are shooting you. That way there's a sense of urgency. That way you can't just go down and like sit on your hands and knees on the ground and then just pop back up, right? Like, once you're down, oh god, I gotta crawl back to cover before I die, right? And then you could also well, actually, we can talk about that in a second. I need to focus on what we're talking about now. But you know, you crawl back behind cover. Okay, boom, there we go. We're safe. That was close. Like, I should have been paying more attention to those snipers or whatever it was, you know. And another thing they could do, when you're down in that state, it would highlight the enemy that actually killed you. That way, if there was a sniper off in the distance that you maybe didn't see, you now, oh, hey, that's what killed me. So that's where it came from. So I need to, you know, I'm going to back up. I'm going to crawl behind cover. And now that I'm behind cover, and, you know, I'll be picked back up, and now I know to watch out for that sniper over there. Then I can kill the sniper first, or I can just not pop up at the sights, whatever it is, right? But I think that would be a better option, because again, it gives you that sense of urgency. Like, I only have a couple seconds of self-res. I can't just wait until, like, you know, my entire team dies, and now, you know, we're about to go back to orbit, then oh, pop back to life. Because that's another thing that would happen in Destiny 1. You know, players would sit and they'd be dead, and 2 people would be handling all the nightfall, and then finally, once everything was handled, they'd go revive that person. So they'd save their super, right? I don't think that that's necessarily a healthy thing for the game either. Like, I don't think that it's right that somebody should die and then leave their teammates to do all the work, then come pick them up, and they didn't have to do anything, right? So that's why, you know, that 8-second timer of, hey, like, I'm down, I gotta crawl back to cover, and maybe not as slow as it was back in Destiny 1, because I think in Destiny, I'm sorry, not Destiny 1, Destiny 2, or Vanilla, in the Red War campaign, like, you were crawling on the ground so slow, like, you literally, like, it was miserable, right? But I think that, you know, having like a slower crawl speed, maybe the speed of like tier 7 resilience when crouched, right? Like if you're familiar with mobility, tier 7 mobility while crouched, like, it's not super fast, but it's not crazy slow that you can't move out of cover, right? Go down, crawl on all fours behind cover, then 8 seconds later it picks you back up. Active gameplay is the key. That's the key to making Destiny fun for everybody, not just for individual players, but for fire teams as well, right? Active play. You die, you have 8 seconds to crawl somewhere where you can be safe. That way, when you're picked back up automatically by the game, you're good to go. Now, I want to talk about PvP as well. And now that I'm thinking about it here, I think the route of, instead of just dying, when you take enough health to die, it knocks you down. I think that would be better off in PvP, because then you have an opportunity to know when somebody is about to self-res, right? Like, you know, what is it? In Call of Duty, there is a perk, I can't remember, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the one that came out just last year or 2 years ago, whatever it was. When you're downed, like when you take enough damage to die, you don't actually die, you fall into like this final stand state. But the reason I bring this up is because there is a very clear animation when you shoot somebody that has that perk on, where they don't die, they go into a final stand and they can pick themselves back up. It is very obvious when that happens. So if somebody's running across cover and you say snipe them and you kill them, they don't die. They like fling up, their body flies up in the air. It's a very, very like noticeable animation. That should be applied to Guardians as well. That way, when you snipe somebody, you snipe somebody across the map, instead of them just like, oh, like, their body just fall into the ground, like there's a very obvious and almost showy animation that shows that they drop to the ground and that they are like on their last leg, right? They're crawling backwards or whatever. Because again, I think problems would arise inside of PvP with self-res, because that was one of the biggest complaints in Destiny 1, and we talked about it already, but that was one of the biggest complaints in Destiny 1 was was PvP. So there's this animation that like, you do a backflip, something crazy, you do a flip. Oh, that is something that only happens when somebody is about to go into their final stand state. Not only that, but I think in PvP, the multiplier for damage against somebody who goes into their final stand should be much higher. Like I'm talking just a couple of AR shots to put them down. Like when I say a couple, I mean like 2 or 3, right? Like your health should be very, very low. That way, like, hey, you know what? If you're playing and you're on top of a hill or you're on top of a wall and you get sniped, you can drop off that wall, fall to the ground. 8 seconds later, you pick yourself up, right? Like oh, I got sniped. Oops, made a mistake, but I can crawl back to safety, right? But if you are caught dead in the open and that happens to you, like it shouldn't take hardly anything to knock you out. Again, self-res, very strong ability. So it should have these trade-offs. It takes your super, it takes your grenade, it takes your melee, it takes your class ability, and inside of PvP, you're also very, very critically wounded, right? Like you're down on the ground, you can't, like, it's gonna be difficult. Like unless you are right next to cover, you're not just gonna be able to pop back up. Oh, I'm alive and well, blah, 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 whatever. Like, I think that would be a way that Bungie could potentially bring back self-res into the game. Again, it would require a new subclass where all 3 classes would have the ability to self-res, right? By consuming their super, their grenade, their melee ability, and their class ability, all 4, you have the ability to come back to life. It can be game-changing. Not game-breaking, but it should be game-changing, right? Again, Grandmaster Nightfall, you get knocked down. So let's say you're the last man standing. Your 2 teammates are out there. They're being idiots and they died out in the open. You're knocked down, but you had your super. You're now brought back to life. You don't have anything else that can help you outside of your ammo that's in your weapon, right? You don't have any abilities or anything, but that second chance is there. And that's what self-res is all about. It's about that second chance when you shouldn't necessarily have it, right? Maybe that was the name of the Call of Duty perk. Sorry, totally off topic. But that's the key. Give players, if they're gonna bring back a second chance, if they're gonna bring back self-res, it should be a second chance, but it shouldn't break the game. And I think that, the way that we talked about in this video would be the best way that Bungie could do it, again, without absolutely busting the game, right? And just one more time, I want to hit on these points one more time. When you're down, it's first of all on a new subclass that all classes default have the ability to use, right? You have to have your super charged. It takes away your super. It also takes away any abilities that you have. You don't have to have all your abilities charged, but it will drain your abilities completely. And it puts you in a dying state that makes you vulnerable to being killed while you crawl to safety, and then you're automatically brought back up after X amount of time. I think that could be a way that Bungie could bring back self-res into the game that would be fun, it would be engaging, it wouldn't promote passive play like it did back in Destiny 1. We've kind of answered, I think, all the problems, all the questions, the problematic aspects of self-res back in D1. But anyways, this video's gone on long enough. That's my thoughts on self-res. That's my what if Bungie brought back self-res to Destiny 2. Of course, I want to hear your thoughts on it. Ali Snake, I'm sure you have some thoughts. I think it would be an interesting concept to bring back. I would actually like to see them make an effort to bring self-res back into the game. I think it'd be very, very fun, but they just have to do it very carefully. But of course, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it would work? Do you like my ideas? Do you not like my ideas? Tell me all those in the comments. Do me a favor, like the video because it helps the channel a lot. Subscribe for more daily Destiny content, and watch the videos you see on the end screen here, because for whatever reason, YouTube thinks you will like them. Guys, I'll see y'all next time. Bye for now.